Hey there, welcome back to Reddit XO, the best channel for Reddit cheating stories. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification for more stories like these.
Absolute devastation to liberation, 20-year relationship destroyed by cheating wife. I've been separated from my cheating ex, 39F, for almost 2 years. We were high school sweethearts at the conclusion of her senior year. I had recently graduated and met her while working at a video store in a small town. We were good friends for approximately 6 months before I mustered the bravery to plant a kiss, and the rest, as they say, is history. Unfortunately, as this story has made its way to the sub, we all know how it ended. I'd never had any friends who cheated, and I'd never heard anyone talk about it, so I had no idea how much trouble was in store for me. It was a coincidental occurrence that I had discovered. My parents were visiting, and my ex left to attend a coworker's wedding in another state. She had told me about the event 2 weeks before. My ex had a few mutual acquaintances, nothing out of the ordinary, but I was watching a movie with the family when I remembered I had misplaced my phone during the day. During the film, I was browsing on my iPad and shifted hesitantly to the Find My iPhone option. We'd been married for 10 years and had a lot of accounts linked together, one of which was iTunes. Instead of my phone being first, it was hers. Instead of being out of state, she was staying at a nearby hotel that also serves as a prominent brewery. They have weddings there all the time, and I was certain that's where I'd find her with her coworkers. Around 8 p.m. I arrived at the hotel and couldn't find her anywhere. After 2 hours of searching, I restricted the GPS to a specific wing. I did my best Eddie Murphy impression because she wasn't in the eateries. That's what I call it when you trick your way into places you shouldn't be or acquire free items, because Eddie was a master of it in all of his early films. Gee, my sister was at that wedding earlier, and I'm concerned some guy took advantage of her because she's intoxicated. Can you give me the room number? I asked at the front desk. They directed me to the room after a little pause and a request for a phone number. My pulse raced as I turned a couple of bends, knowing what I was about to discover. I knocked on the door and attempted to channel Eddie once more. Is there room service? I said it in the most nice tone I could summon while concealing my indignation and anger. A male said that I may have entered the incorrect room. My secret was immediately shattered. I believe I have the correct FING room. Why don't you open up and let us have a conversation? My cheating spouse begins contacting me, and I finally figure out what's going on. She claims she wants to talk in the morning and refuses to leave the room. Okay, spend the rest of the night with your boyfriend. I stayed for about an hour just to see if they'd come out. The restrooms at this location are in the halls, European style, but no one came out, so I gave up. I went and snapped photos of her car as proof, and then went home, distraught, to a sleepless night. She requested me to meet her in a large park where she knew there would be a lot of people. That's what she said. Okay, I've never touched you or raised my voice at you in 20 years, but domestic violence is a concern now. I arrive at the park a few minutes late, making her wait, and discover that my expectations are still off. Despite the fact that I had a cold shoulder the night before, I was eager to make this work, to mend it. I came with a forgiving heart, expecting remorse. Surely my wife of 10 to 11 years wouldn't betray our entire existence. She's in tears, says she's sorry, and appears to be upset the entire time. When I told her how I found out, she smirked. We talked about her coming home, and I was both shocked and enthralled to hear her say, I just can't go back to the way things were, I'm so imprisoned there. 3. Okay, so she's the victim, right? She stayed in a downtown hotel for 3 days, probably to spend time with her lover and determine whether or not to return home. The AP was in a relationship as well, and she has a 12-year-old son, so perhaps the burden was too much for her. She returned home. For a week, he was completely deafeningly deaf. She claims she'll work on it, but she just needs some space after everything she's been through. She's had enough of the AP. We do the proper thing and begin marital therapy. Session 1, there are no further information, I request transparency, and I've been going crazy studying affairs on the internet. She just asserts that she cannot return to the way things were, but she is unable to articulate why our lives were not happy or satisfying enough, or what she means by her assertion. Fortunately for me, the therapist notices something and asks pointedly, "You've terminated the affair, right?" Awe and shock. No, she hadn't. Well, I was going to phone him and inform him, but I haven't done so yet. As I started the slow troll into the trickle truth, she confessed that she'd been with him for at least a year. It was entirely and completely unknown to me. She manipulated me with gifts while I was still joyful in the bedroom. She once gave me a watch with the words "Love you more" every second engraved on the underside. When she was out of town on business/affair frolicking, she'd remember to send me texts and call. Eventually, I'm just a ball of tears, debating whether to go to jail, get out of this right now, or stay in the marriage I'm so dedicated to. I adore this woman with all of my heart. Session 2. Transparency is horrible. In fact, my wife has disabled location sharing on all devices and reset all of her passwords. Okay, how dare I ask for such a thing when she's so broken and in mourning? The cheating ex requests an open relationship, which will solve everything. I'm shocked, desperate, and in a dreadful position, and I must confess that I agree. I guess I secretly know it's over, but I'm not sure how to convince my physical self. The therapist approaches her and tells her she needs to break up with the AP, no word on that yet, and that polyamory may not be healthy at this stage in our relationship. My ex swears he'll never go back to counseling since the woman was rude to her. Okay, I'm beginning to notice a pattern here. Every night, I wail a deep and awful cry. This woman who loved me and shared the deepest intimacy suddenly doesn't want to be with me. We go around the house like ghosts of our previous selves. I spontaneously rage and scream at the world. It's the darkest era of my life that I can recollect. We had, I believe it was makeup, but when we were finished, she said she simply needed to get off, and that we never really loved each other. Ouch. Oh, I believed we had a beautiful connection that never lost its luster, that we were intimate in the bedroom 2 to 4 times a week all the time. I make a move, which may be a mistake. I use Tinder and go on a few dates. I genuinely tell folks I'm married and planning to divorce. Before meeting with these people, I was completely open and honest. One of them told me that if I got the divorce finalized, she should call me since I'm a lovely guy. The other drove me to her house and tucked me into her bed. I wished I had waited since it would have given my ex more firepower and a modest reason for the affair. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm nearly finished with the crazy train. She goes on an obvious camping trip with her AP the same weekend and informs me about it in the name of transparency. Meanwhile, nothing else I've asked for has been validated. It was because of this setting that I continued to feel useless and slept with the Tinder fling. By Monday, I'd had enough. Surprisingly, I'm still eager to work through it and fix the marriage that no longer exists. WS leaves for a business trip, and at this point I have no idea what's going on. There's no trust. You leave this man, you commit to loving me, you repair this trust now, or I'm leaving before you get home, I say. She replied that she wasn't sure she could accomplish all. It's no longer a marriage, it's a mess that needs to be cleaned up. While she is away, I pack all of my possessions, take the dog, and relocate to a new apartment with some friends. She didn't think I'd do it. She contacted me sobbing that night, asking why I'd relocated my belongings. It's a total excursion to crazy town. I advised her she needed to act quickly because she had been dealing with this for about 2 months and needed to make a decision. I couldn't live with her as part of this circumstance, and that time is coming to an end. I assured her that in 2 months or less, I'd be well entrenched in the divorce camp. That she'd done nothing to help me, and had just made abusive remarks due to her selfishness and insatiable want to be validated by males. She responded by saying it was my fault I found out about the affair. In her words, she wasn't looking for a way out, but would have continued to play the nice housewife character for the rest of our lives if I hadn't discovered it. What I heard on the phone disgusted me and nearly drove me insane. What was the identity of this individual I believed I recognized? Who did I spend my life with? Who valued me so little that I was a throwaway object or, at most, there to satisfy her wants and desires? She took a step back and said, "This may be a good thing. We'll mature into something new, go on dates, and be happy to see each other again. We'll get back together if it's meant to be." Seriously, even in this state, I knew that relationships take work and that love is a practice, and I was getting none of that from this awful shell of a human being. I tried to meet with her about a week later, and she stated she wanted to talk about the divorce. It was basically just her seeking to flirt with me and then manage my attempts. She'd tell me how much she loved me, but if I tried to touch her leg, she'd tell me she wasn't ready for that yet. Since I had moved out, she had also moved out and was paying double rent by having a wonderful downtown apartment just a few blocks from the pub we were at. When I offered to walk her home, she laughed, saying she'd be fine, and that she wasn't ready for me to visit her new apartment. Okay, so I've been your husband for nearly 11 years, we've been married for 20, and now I can't touch your leg or walk you home. That night, alone with the dog in my new rented room at my friend's house, I bit the pillow hard and sobbed harder than I had ever sobbed in my life. This time it wasn't about wants or desires, but I knew it was done, completely over. I knew the woman I loved had left, perhaps the rose-colored glasses had been removed, but I knew it would be in my best interests to never connect with this person again, and to cut them out of my life. I was upset because I had honestly and deeply given my love to this individual, and had assumed that it had been reciprocated all these years. As my therapist and many others on this site have pointed out, I was the lobster in a pot. I didn't notice the warning flags when she slandered my friends or told me her pals despised me. I didn't notice the red flags when she'd purchase me near and show me around like a trophy, well, I'm kinda fit and handsome. I didn't notice the red signals when she began traveling incessantly for work. I didn't notice them when I asked her how she really felt and if there was anything I could do to improve our connection. Part of it is love's eyes, and part of it is her nefarious manipulation, which I couldn't see until now. For her, nothing was ever enough. Not my job, not our house, and not the effort I did on it. It was all a ruse that suited my codependency nicely. I wanted to mend things and be good enough, and she was extremely skilled at creating enough chaos and dangling enough carrots to keep me interested. I wasn't asking for love to be returned, but rather to love her so deeply that it was enough for both of us. With my mind clear, I decided that the divorce was going to happen, and with her wild attitude, that meant I was going to file all the papers. I wish I could conclude this mega rant here, but you've only seen the awakening up to this point. The claws are about to emerge. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, and I was confident that I was making the right choices in my life. I'm surrounded by friends, making progress, and getting insight. I understood I was in a trap and made the hard decision not to get back together. Asterisk ring. Asterisk ring. Asterisk. Oh my goodness, who could that be? It's my WS, and we were meant to meet for coffee to talk about the divorce and the tangled paperwork. She informs me she won't be able to make it at the appointed time, but that if I text her 2 hours later, we can meet up. Fine. I jump through more hoops, and when I text her, she says she's up at the neighboring family mountain cabin, and that I should come up for the week and stay with her. Okay, I'll just throw away all my integrity and the sliver of self-respect I've discovered and jump back in the sack. No way. We're not going. After explaining the significance of working through the divorce process, I declined the invitation. She becomes agitated and irritated that I am not eager to abandon everything in my life and rush up to the cottage. When I ask her about the AP, she says he broke up with her as soon as I was out of the picture. I suppose karma is a fickle beast at times. When we eventually meet for coffee, and I bring all the documentation, she compliments me on how well I look, and how well I appear to be doing. Nope, I'm devastated, and this isn't a game to me, what's up? We go over the specifics of splitting up the house, which she claims she is entitled to more than half of. I'm not to touch her 401k, and as a compromise, I get to keep my 10-year-old business undisturbed. I'm going to stay on her insurance for the length of the divorce, and we'll get things sorted out as soon as possible. As I turn to leave, she pursues me and follows me to my car, mumbling about something. I inquire, spinning on my heel, if she has anything to say about herself. I'm desperately looking for remorse, perhaps a fragment of a shred of the person I thought loved me. It says something that sounds more like a question than an answer. I'm sorry for what? I ask. For. I really apologize for what I did. The words faded off, as though released by Zootopia's tiniest church mouse. It was a harmless effort that reeked of shell shock from being caught rather than remorse in action. In some ways, it was beneficial since it confirmed that my assumptions were true and that I knew where I stood. She wasn't upset because of anything she did. She was sad because she had lost me as an asset with her cover blown, and now wanted this man back in her life who had once done anything for her. It was the only apology I'd ever get. She asks what our story will be, and I hesitate to try to figure out what she's asking. So, what are we going to tell people? What are we going to say happened? That we just wanted to see other people or something? What is our story? Oh, okay, yeah, our tale. You can say whatever you want, but I'm going to tell the truth to everybody who will listen. That's exactly what happened. You crushed my heart, you walked away from marriage, and now you want your cake. I've had enough, and I don't need to make up a tale to make myself feel better. Okay, bye. I turn and walk away, and as soon as I cross the street, a train arrives, putting an end to our talk. I quickly get in my car and text all of her relatives about the divorce and what transpired. I felt okay about closing the door, knowing there was no healthy way to mend things and acknowledging it wasn't a healthy relationship to begin with. Other catastrophes continued to fall my way as the divorce process progressed. I was shot with a full-bore double-barreled shotgun. Our house flooded on Super Bowl Sunday, about 3 months before D-Day, while my WS was away on one of her business or personal excursions. I went to a friend's house and returned home to discover our garage half filled with water. She was supposed to be in Amsterdam, where several field offices were located, but when I called to inform her of the calamity, it seemed like she was right next door. In any case, she just starts yelling at me to fix it, which is exactly what I'm doing. If I had been wise, I would have dashed to Home Depot in the last few minutes it was open and grabbed a sump pump to empty the driveway. Fortunately, our garage was connected to a finished basement and was located at the lowest point on the property. Water, on the other hand, has completely infiltrated the garage and nearly breached the step-up to gain admission into the house. I contact a buddy who is a landscape architect and can help in a variety of ways. We fill sandbags till midnight, but heavy rain is preventing us from progressing. We've protected the property for a few moments, but it's going to crest due to the year's record rainfall. We devised a plan to divert the water from the driveway into my basement utility room, where the drain is located. We get some 60-foot garden hoses, and I start pulling with my lungs to get the water to flow. It's effective. Aside from obtaining a taste of groundwater, I get a good continuous stream of gallons per minute streaming to the drain. The driveway does not retreat, but it also does not overflow. This afforded me some time to bail calf-deep water around the house, which I did by pulling up approximately 5 gallons at a time with a shop vac and heaving it over. We have one leaking gutter, and instead of draining down the French drain, it's overflowing into the driveway. I begin filling a large rubbish can, which must be emptied every 3 hours, or it will fill with rainwater. I'm soaking. I've been in the rain and water for 24 hours, and I haven't slept. When I sleep, I set an alarm to get up and leave so that no harm is done. I fly to Home Depot the next morning and buy an electric pump, which practically saves the day. This modest $50 or less pump diverts over 3,000 gallons of water per hour and entirely moves the driveway down the street to run off in approximately 3 hours. Yes, I had about 9,000 gallons of water piled up on my driveway, leg to knee deep. The next day, I go to work and see my landlord for the business. He owns a construction company, and I tell him about my ordeal. He quickly contacts his disaster team and delivers free industrial dehumidifiers to the residents to soak up any water from the walls and structure. I leave these running for a few days, and the pump is still running in the driveway when my WS gets home. She begins to tell me that I was stressing her out with this scenario, and that I should have told her when she returned. Okay, thought you'd be interested in the possibility of losing the house and nearly causing $40,000 in potential damages. Then she proceeded to say that the pump in the driveway is like so, and that if I don't move it, she will. It's still raining and trying to flood the house, and my neighbors have even come over to offer assistance. When I return home from a morning appointment, the pump has been relocated to the garage. I eventually get the pipe repaired, and the rain stops long enough for the water to drain. On the nose, about a week later, I have a terrible sickness that I can't seem to shake. On any given spring Saturday, I begin watching movies and resting. Mid-afternoon, my chest begins to pain severely and refuses to go away despite over-the-counter medication. I tell my WS what's going on, and I believe it's becoming serious. Can't you look for yourselves, ugh? So I'm not driving you to the emergency room. I'll accompany you, but I'm not driving. Fine, I'll drive myself to the hospital. Thank you very much for coming with me, dear. I arrive at the hospital's emergency room and am checked in. When I arrive, they see that my oxygen level has dropped somewhat, but nothing serious. We've been waiting for nearly 3 hours, and my chest is hammering, making it difficult to breathe. My ex refuses to see me, so I stumble to the front desk and nearly fall down. They promise to come collect me and put me in a wheelchair. Finally, someone arrives and takes more vitals, but they don't get to the bottom of the problem. I tell them I think I have pneumonia because my chest hurts and I can't breathe. They minimize it and say it's unlikely, but they transport me to a stretcher in an empty room. I wait another hour, and by this time I'm completely bewildered and hardly breathing. My ex is staring at me with dagger eyes and is completely unhelpful. To this woman's horror, I literally start yelling help. Someone help me over and over. I don't mind. I feel like I'm going to die. I'm going to die. After approximately 3 to 5 minutes, someone comes in, furious that I'm yelling, but agrees to examine me. My oxygen level had dropped to roughly 50%, which is life-threatening on its own, and my blood had nearly become septic. I have bacterial pneumonia, which I most certainly got by swallowing that piece of groundwater in my mouth while rescuing the house. She never thanked me. She actually stated that she deserved more than half of the house, and that she should probably take it all. After being given various fluids, I was given a morphine drip to aid with the chest aches. I drift in and out of consciousness with ease, and as I emerge from my trance, I catch her eyes. This soulless human being stares back, as though wishing I had perished right there. We have million-dollar policies that would be a big help to this woman. It was then that I noticed the big red sign. I sensed something was wrong, and even though I caught her by mistake, I began keeping track of what she said and who she said she was with. They didn't add up, and I knew something wasn't right. The frosting on the cake was that the rounds of antibiotics I was taking, along with the stress of the divorce, wiped out my gut bacteria. I'd spend the next year discovering that I had small intestine bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, returning to the ongoing divorce. That back narrative, along with the prior dialogues, I believe is crucial because it creates the groundwork for the events that follow. In order to provide context, I'll list them in brief. My ex said a few things in action after our meeting, where I was offered the weakest apologies in the history of language, and I alerted her family about the affair. First, she made it a point to inform acquaintances and her close family that I was a deadbeat, a non-contributor to the relationship both emotionally and financially. She had stated that she had always desired children, but that I did not, and that she was afraid of me since I was borderline violent. As a result, I continue to explain the problem or eliminate people out of my life who refuse to listen to my side of the story. Of course, the truth is that she has maintained for decades that she does not want children, and that bringing it up causes a tremendous fight. Her family, of course, took her side, and in the previous 20 years, I've lost relationships that I thought were my family. Nope, I just went completely non-contact. Fortunately, most of our actual friends abandoned her and realized what she was up to. When my ex found out about my gut bacteria and all of my medical issues, she called to tell me that we should be friends and that she would make sure I stayed on our insurance through her job. I denied her request to meet up again because I knew she wanted to rekindle the feelings. As soon as I hung up, she began falsifying paperwork and submitting a letter of legal separation to HR in order to prevent me from receiving insurance. At numerous doctor's appointments, I quickly discovered that something was incorrect with my coverage. All they would say was that the policy had been canceled. I tried everything I could to get COBRA insurance, but even though I was willing to pay the $800 monthly fee, they were unable to activate it. It was a nightmare spending out of pocket and phoning back and forth. I'd contact my ex, and she'd bemoan the fact that she had no idea what was going on. I eventually reached the correct person at HR, who informed me that they couldn't set up COBRA because they were seeking for the judge who signed the legal separation documents presented by my ex. I was appalled and horrified, so I asked them to describe what they meant. My ex had fabricated a court document, signed it with a bogus name where the judge's credentials should have been, and filed it to HR in order to fraudulently remove me off insurance prior to divorce. I yelled that they would never find the judge and that what they were holding was a forgery because we had never been in court together or filed any official documents of separation. OMG. HR panicked like you've never seen before, and I was given my insurance back for all of the time I was out. That's also why I couldn't get COBRA insurance, because they were waiting for this fictitious judge to rule on the legality of everything. I texted my ex, furious, telling her she needed to call HR and expedite the process, and she played foolish, saying, "Well, we're separated, I just don't want to do anything unlawful." We'd meet a week later, and she'd hand me COBRA documents at my lawyer's office, pretending to offer assistance after the event. She had the house sold. Congratulations to her. Except she sold it right under my nose. She signed my name on all the forms, but never provided me the final sum. I had to learn the truth through my lawyer and the discovery procedure. That ached as well. She wanted to take over my company and only left it alone because I threatened to take over her 401k. In retrospect, I wish I had. Her retirement money was really our retirement fund, and we joked that I should buy all the food because she was contributing to our future. My job didn't have that option because I was self-employed, and while I was saving for retirement, it wasn't the matched account she had the opportunity of creating. She was fully prepared to demolish my business as well, but luckily for me, she was too cheap to afford a lawyer, and mine safeguarded my assets and informed her that any judge would let me keep it and take her 401k if I so desired. To this day, she continues to tell people that I never wanted children, and my poor mother simply breaks down because she knows it was the other way around. In an attempt to substantiate her ludicrous story even further, she is now pregnant with the AP's child. That's correct, they're still together, despite the fact that she told me they'd split up when we did. She waited around 6 months before introducing him to the family as the new beau. He enjoys improv comedy laughing face LOL, but he has a day job, and they met through her workplace. I discovered all of this because one of his friends cyber-stalked me on Facebook and sent me the sweetest message saying he was sorry for everything and that they're both disgusting people. Yes, 2 years later, in April, I see these strange IRS charges totaling $12,000 go through my bank account. The figures don't add up, so I contact the bank and my accountant. My dearly departed ex, you guessed it, used my checking account to pay her taxes. Oopsies. I offer her 24 hours to repay the monies, or I will file a fraudulent charge against her. In retrospect, I wish I had, and let the IRS punish her into oblivion for it. We texted back and forth, she refuses to apologize and instead asks why I'm so upset. It gets crazy, and I finally declare that I know who the AP is, and that his pals should avoid contacting me online. She never says anything about it, and the only response I ever get is "Who have you been talking to?" All of this, with a light at the end of the tunnel. Apart from this individual I loved strongly about at one point in my life, I'm here today to tell you that I made it. I not only survived because I'm a champ, but I'm better off for it. The most obvious thing is that you, the Redditor, are probably as sick and disgusted as I am with this lady. Humans like this should not be living, and they should surely not bear children. This adventure has become so much more for me and has catapulted me to a new level of growth that I am overjoyed about. I discovered that I am a fixer not long after starting therapy. I grew up in a home where I was undervalued, and my spouse fit right in like a glove. All her unquenchable expectations and hoops to jump through made it feel like home. I was always reshaping myself to be the person I believed would make her happy while never being true to myself. Clearly, that method failed and set me up for failure, as detailed here. One of the most difficult lessons I had to learn was to separate my ex from my own self-worth, since I was offering love without ever expecting to receive it in return. Someone else recently made a post that struck a chord with me. I had loved her for so long, and so deeply that I had assigned a certain degree of my own self-worth from our connection. When that was severed, I inadvertently felt as though my worth had decreased. That I needed to prove myself to my ex, or else she would think I was more valuable when she was with me. What a tragic statement, yet until recently, I couldn't put my finger on it. Because I didn't know myself, I never learned to be at ease with my wants, ambitions, and desires. I never learned to be content with my triumphs and mistakes. I arrived late to the party and never learned what my worth to others could possibly be, instead burying it all under the guise of trying to be good enough for others to like me. I was always open and socially entertaining, but it didn't come from a good place. Now that I can spot the red flags in others, I know what I bring to the table, and what I want in this world. I've developed so much in the last year in all of these areas. I've found who my true friends and family are, and I can't express how grateful I am to have them in my life. I met someone, a lovely lady with her priorities in order. We love each other unconditionally, she is proud of my triumphs, and shares the burden of hurdles with me. She treats others around her, including me, with empathy and kindness, based on a strong commitment to these ideals. I consider myself really fortunate to have met her, and to be able to continue my life's adventure with this young, passionate woman. We recently purchased a camper van and are planning a cross-country road trip for my 40th birthday. It's all I could want and more, because it's full of nuance that I wouldn't have known to ask for in my former relationship. I could write a mini novel about all the simple and beautiful gestures she has showered on me. My business has grown by leaps and bounds in the last year, and I'm now free to make decisions about it without fear of being shamed or scorned by my partner. I can also be proud of what I've produced, and I can work on it as hard as I want or take a break, and let my team handle the day-to-day operations if I so desire. It's a wonderful place to be, and it's a lot better than it was a few years ago, when I thought I was in a happy marriage. I'm about to celebrate and enjoy my own birthday for the first time in 30 years. When I write it out, it seems so insignificant, yet it's a significant step for me to accept and be satisfied with who I am. If you've read this far, thank you for your openness and curiosity, as well as your support in allowing me to share this openly and freely. I'm not sure whether this post will assist anyone else, but it did for me, and the cathartic process of letting go of the betrayal inflicted by a human monster.